Hey, Chris here.
Hey, Chris, it's Errol Collins. How are you doing today?
Hey, good, Errol.
Doing fantastic. You ready to talk about that new album?
Sure am, yeah.
Absolutely. I love the idea that you've got it as a title track hit as well as the name of the album. What was the marriage there? What? Because not every song gets to be on the front cover of that album.
That's a good point. I think here we just felt that it was the perfect song to express what we're doing with the record. We're moving on. You know, everybody's been through rough times. You just got to keep going, right? We figured that's emblematic of the kind of how we've approached music too, right? So we figured that was a good title as well as kind of the song we wanted people to hear first.
Oh my God. And listeners need to understand that when you first listen to it without seeing the video, you're going to get an impression that's going to stay with you. Then you watch the video and you're going, oh my God, look at all those cars.
Cars are cool, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
I mean, that's the apex, I think, of American can do. You know, these guys just out on the weekends, willy-nilly trying, you know, new forms of fuel, new kinds of, you know, engines, just going crazy. And what came out of that? Well, Carroll Shelby and the entire like American muscle car scene, you know, very rock and roll.
One of the things that you guys do is that you love to play with your sound, just like guys like to play with their cars. Because I mean, you guys really dig in there with some nasty blues and some jump, some country boogie, and I mean, I love that you're creating your own genre.
Yeah, you got to take the pieces, you got to take the influences that are out there, and then you play it your own way. And that's just, you're right, it's a lot like making cars.
Yeah. I grew up in the state of Montana, so I was constantly surrounded by Canadian musicians. And I've always told people in radio that, you know, why aren't we playing more Canadian artists? And because, I mean, even with Chilliwack, I mean, why didn't the nation embrace that Canadian band?
What a great singer he was too, especially. Hey, I think of that song "Arms and Mary." That It wasn't their song; they covered that song. One of the great '70s ballads. No one in America really knows it. I know it's great. They were a great band. I don't know. Sometimes, you know, Canadian rock has got its own thing. Sometimes they got their CanCon rules on radio, so they kind of fill their boots with their own stuff, and sometimes that's at the expense of better music, frankly. But sometimes the good Canadian stuff doesn't make it down here.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry. What about Lions in the Street? I mean, to get you to even come into the South, how do we do that?
Well, right now we're partly based in San Diego, so we're kind of straddling the border, so to speak, here. So it's pretty good. We're all West Coast, though, so there's a lot of continuity between BC and California, you know.
Do you find yourself recognizing that the regions are very much alive like they used to be? In other words, being West Coast, being, you know, from the Pacific Northwest, everybody is developing their own sight and sound again.
Oh, it's absolutely true. And I think a part of that is because of inflation, which makes touring really hard, especially on the West Coast. You know, if you're from Montana, you know how big Western North America is, right? It's huge. And it's not like the East Coast where these bands go between, you know, they got 40, 50 different venues between New York and New Jersey and Connecticut, you know. West Coast, you got to drive a long ways. Even between L.A. and San Fran, it's like, you know, 2 states worth of driving to get there. So I think as things get more expensive, touring gets a little harder, you find more of that, more regionalism, which is great.
Even if you were to float across the state of Montana, I would love to see Sean Casey, because he'd probably be sitting there playing with that guitar looking for new riffs.
Yeah, he definitely would. He's the riff-master, that guy. I don't know, something about the Irish. They get like Rory Gallagher and all those guys. They get the riffs.
Well, to me, it goes along with the limericks, because they've got that beat already inside their head. Now, what are we going to do in between the beats?
That's very true. That's very true. Funny.
Do you guys piece part your music in the way that it's like he'll come up with a riff, he puts it away for a while, and then you'll come back to it months later? Or are you working on lyrics the same way?
Yeah, I find lyrics are the last thing. Like we work. I always say this about rock and roll. You know, "To Do Run Run Run, To Do Run Run" is a great song. Nobody really cares about the lyrics. The lyrics just have to fit the song. As long as the lyrics fit the song, that's all that matters. So we focus mostly on the melody and the music, and then the lyrics come last. Not that they're uninspired, but it's just that they take a little longer. You know, like you've heard Keith Richards talk about this too. It's the consonants and the sounds that the melody requires. You have to fit the words into that. It's like a puzzle more than poetry.
See, I'm totally with you on that, because I love looking at people's books when they're in the studio and they rewrite some lyrics right on the spot. And it's like, and it can be a painful moment where you're going, but this is what I want to say. Yeah, but it's not coming across that way.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't work. It sounds bad. Yeah, that's funny.
Do you miss those days being in a garage band? Because I still have photographs of my band way back in the 1970s, and I look at it and I feel like it's still very much alive in my soul.
Oh, for sure. That's why if you notice a lot of those Instagram sites that there's one, I forget the name of it, it's called Underground Scene or something, Forgotten Scene, and it's all these pictures that people send in of themselves in garages.
Yep.
In any era, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, modern ones too, playing music. It's timeless. It really is, because I think everybody, it's almost entrepreneurial, right? It's like these guys who you're not getting paid, you're doing it for the love of the game. It's like amateur sports or something. You do it because you love it, and that's why people return to it.
Oh, yeah. It was like us. Well, Becky Ziske lived about 3 houses down. We needed her to come up to the garage, so we would just crank it up a little bit louder.
There you go.
How did you define the art and really kind of grow with the art of every instrument being in its rightful place? It becomes part of the story, especially when you toss in that harmonica. I mean, you've got everything there, and I can hear it all.
Yeah, that's a lot of that is the mixing is Rick Parker, who's a real talented producer, engineer, who came up with that mix, and he really nailed it. But I think recording, we did it live. We overdubbed the harmonica, and it's really just panning the guitars. Me and Sean play so well together that we just pan the guitars, hard pan them mostly, and then the harp right up the middle. It just kind of all came together. Sometimes there's a certain ineffable magic to it, right? You don't know why it sounds good. It just does. It's like a math equation, But, I think a part of that is just playing a lot.
Well, I mean, because when you talk about how it all comes together like that, because right away I'm starting to think of moving along again, and I'm going, holy crap. I mean, the way I hear it and the way that it started with you are two completely different things.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's the studio magic. Precisely. Yeah.
Wow. So what were those early days with that song? What did it sound like?
It was a riff.
Really?
Just for Sean. And if you notice that song, it's a vamp. There's no chord change in that song, which is really rare in modern music. I mean, we love chord changes. We got a whole other batch of songs that are kind of Beatles to the Stones, right? We're big into songcraft, but on this one, it was kind of like a Faces vamp. You just stay on one chord and you build around that, and that's its own challenge, right? Because you can't move to a new chord to change things up. You have to change the instrumentation or the arrangement. So we just kind of built from there. We decided that we didn't need a chord change. We just break it down a little in the bridge and then play back up, and it worked great.
As a band, is it a bigger goal to get on people's Spotify list? Because I'm a DJ, and that's all I see anymore are Spotify lists. They're not talking about radio. They're talking about their Spotify list. How do you get on that list?
That's a good question. I think some of it is pretty corrupt. I mean, that's true. I don't mean Spotify's corrupt, but I just mean that, major labels have a lot of money and a lot of resources to get their artists on those lists. But we found just getting the music out. We ended up on a couple of Joe Bonamassa playlists last week. It's just that people hear the music eventually, and if they like it, they'll put you on their list. I think it's that simple. You just have to hang in there a lot, try to get the word out.
One of the things that I've noticed with your music is how much you respect the vocals. I mean, those vocals are such a major part of what's going on. I mean, you've got the instrumentation going on, but then here comes these vocals. It's almost like, hi, welcome to my house. Come on in. I got something to share with you.
Yeah, I mean, those... I cut those in my basement. It just goes to show you that a simple SM58 right in with and then, I mean, you never know. As long as you're direct, I find with recording, like there's very little in between the signal, and the voice, you can get pretty good stuff.
Creatively speaking, though, I mean, when you're doing it in your basement, that means you're in your own place. That, to me, that transfers over into music. Like, for instance, like when I'm doing a commercial and they've hired me to sell a product, whatever mindset I'm in, that can be sold inside that commercial. So I always want to be upbeat and positive so that the listener can receive that.
I like that. I think that makes sense. That's definitely true with vocals. Some of the worst vocals I've ever done were in big studios. Like we used to record at Bryan Adams' studio in Vancouver, which is he's got one of the old Neves from Montserrat, or one of the big studios, and It's just too much pressure. You can't be yourself. You can't relax. And I think there's a lot to be said for home recording. You know?
Well, I've always called it the new garage band. I mean, because when you're sitting there in your own home recording, I mean, heck, I bet Dave Matthews would have done the same thing, but because they were down in the basement as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's so convenient. You're right about that. And who needs to be paying whatever those studios used to charge, like $2,000, $3,000 a day? Forget it. Yeah.
So are you doing any touring or anything like that?
We're working on that. It's tricky now. Like I mentioned, the cost of touring just from inflation is insane. Like, I don't know if you saw the Black Keys canceled their entire North American tour for that reason. And lots of other acts just aren't going on the road. We're looking at some regional dates here in Southern California. It's really easy to get to LA and Vancouver as well. But that's definitely work in progress here.
One of the things that listeners don't understand is that when it comes to analytics, we've got to get your numbers up in listening, and listeners need to do that. They need to just go and listen to this music. So because a lot of these club owners and a lot of these arenas say, "What's your analytics? Give me the analytics. We'll see if we're going to put you on the tour."
That's funny. It's like sports now.
Yeah, and it's tough. You've just got to get people to show up. And I receive things from on Facebook all the time going, "Please go listen to this song. I got to get my numbers up."
Yeah, that's kind of too bad in a way. You think of all, like, how many great bands never really sold any records. Like, so there's tons of them. NRBQ, no one knows who NRBQ is. Great band. You know, think of the Velvet Underground.
Even the Guess Who went through that. I mean, that's the reason why they're called the Guess Who. They didn't want anybody to know who they were until it crossed that line.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. Our old buddy Garth, who's in Vancouver, producer, his dad was Jack Richardson, who did the Guess Who and did a bunch of Bob Seger stuff. So I love both those bands.
Absolutely. Where can people go to find out more about the band? And I hope you've got some merchandise, because people over here on the East Coast love wearing band merchandise.
We're working on merchandise. It'll all be through our website, mostly at lionsinthestreetband.com. That's the best place they can sign up and get notices from us. And we don't spam people. We only send things out like once a couple weeks. And then also we're on all the social sites, which everyone seems to love. Lots of guitar stuff on there on Instagram, for instance. The same, Lions in the Street Band.
Wow. You got to come back to this show in the future, man. I love it when each time you release a song, we got to talk about it. We got to break it down, and we've got to do things just to keep the word on the street.
That sounds awesome. Thanks, Errol. Appreciate that.
Excellent. Well, you be brilliant today, okay?
Thanks, man. You too.